Welcome, everyone, to the survey analysis. I got to change my thing. I am not going to be the host. Pastor Gavin is the host of this series. I am just going to be joining him on the after shows to talk about a couple of things more in depth and to help him cover a couple of questions that people might have before they even ask him. Pastor Gavin, Genesis. I think the first episode was very good, and but there was a couple of things that I did want to go over with you that maybe people might want some clarification on. This one, the first one, was just a personal question of mine. People in the book of Genesis, people live, they have kids on the 300th, on the 200th day of their 425th year of living. So people used to live a long time shortly after creation.
Yeah. In fact, that was true before the flood. And then, people who were born not long after the flood lived longer, but the lifespan of humans significantly declined after the flood.
After the flood.
So, right. Yeah. So, people wonder, well, how is that possible? Well, okay, here's an ancient source that, and there have been other cultures and civilizations that talk about, hey, there was a golden age long ago where people lived to be 1,000 years old. So the Bible's not the only place that says that, but here's what I think accounted for that. Adam and Eve had absolutely perfect genetics, and so the human genome was very pure, and so over time, like whenever humans reproduce, the DNA gets copied. And I went into this a little bit, and each time DNA is copied, something can go wrong with the copying process, and it does.
Yeah.
Now, there are mechanisms that God made that can correct some of the copying errors. It's amazing. But, the DNA can be corrected, some of it, but some of the copying errors ever since the fall get through. So that's what mutations are. Now, some mutations are neutral. They seem to have no effect, but there are mutations that are absolutely detrimental. And so some of these are passed down to successive generations. So when you have genetic diversity, so in other words, a bunch of different genes, we're talking about humans now. The humans would tend to be more healthy, but if you have less genetic diversity, then defective genes have more of a chance to become more and more prominent. That's why if you married your sister and had children, you would probably have some defective kids because you would have the same defective genes as your sister. That's why, close relatives, it's not a good idea for them to marry.
Yeah.
Now, it would have been fine with Adam and Eve's kids way back then because they didn't have any other choices, and that's the way that God set it up, and the genome was pure. But, as time goes on, that became accelerated, not only because of changes in the earth, which were less conducive to longevity, but you have a genetic a genetic bottleneck. In other words, when the whole human race was wiped out in the flood, the only survivors would have been Noah and his 3 sons and their wives. That cuts down on the genetic diversity. So there would be more of a chance that the defective genes would not be offset by, dominant genes that would be normal. So I think those two things account for it.
Yeah.
Changes in the earth itself, like the earth was
from the flood, and there was likely even changes to the atmosphere as a result of the flood also. So
there's some evidence that there may have been more oxygen and also more carbon dioxide, higher levels in the pre-flood world.
You actually answered another question that I had, and that was to just confirm that Noah and his family, his 3 sons and their daughters, were the only ones that survived the flood.
Right. Yeah.
Now, Noah's a lot in Genesis, but isn't he also in Exodus as well?
No,
No.
no,
Okay.
no, he dies. Well, I mean, unless later on in the Bible he might be mentioned in some genealogies, but no, he came through the flood and lived for a while, and then he died.
Okay.
So no, he's not in. Exodus picks up where the children of Israel are in Egypt.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So
Exodus is the second book. That's the next episode we'll be doing. Is that
yes.
correct? Okay, good.
Mhm.
Well, at
Yeah.
least I got something
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
um, so
Well, that's questions are how we learn. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Um, now I wanted to ask you about. You said something when you were talking about the different kinds that Noah
Hmm.
was getting for the ark. Um,
Yeah.
two questions about that. 'Cause you said you quoted and you said clean and unclean.
Yes.
What is the difference between a clean and an unclean animal during
Oh,
that?
good question. Okay, so when we talk about clean and unclean, we're not talking about how much bacteria is on the animal. We're talking about ceremonially clean. And so God gave the children of Israel instructions, dietary laws, and so some animals were pronounced ceremonially clean. In other words, they could be eaten, and also they could be offered as sacrifices to God. And others were ceremonially unclean. So here's the basic breakdown. Animals that had split hooves and that would chew the cud, they were clean. Now, chewing the cud means they have more than one stomach. They swallow it and they chew it and then they barf it up and swallow it again and, chew it again. And so animals that have a split hoof and chew the cud, they were clean. And when it came to birds, basically birds that were birds of prey, like owls and birds that would feed on dead animals, and they would be unclean.
Okay.
Uh, and so now with the split hoof and chewing the cud, deer have both. So do cows, and yeah, there are a lot of animals like that. But like for example, pigs have a split hoof, but pigs don't chew the cud, so they would be ceremonially unclean. Now, when it came to fish that had fins and scales, they had both. They were clean. Now, those dietary laws helped, uh, for one thing, to keep Israel from becoming infected with certain diseases. So, there were health and hygienic reasons. And, God knew about bacteria and germs and so forth before the people of Israel did. They didn't know about things like that. But, if you avoid animals that eat other animals, you're going to, avoid certain contagion, certain diseases and things like that. And it only makes sense you would avoid animals that would prey on other animals or eat dead animals,
Yeah.
so that would keep them more free from diseases. And it's interesting when it comes to fish. Um, there are a lot of fish in the ocean that are poisonous, and the poisonous fish don't have fins and scales.
Hmm.
You know, uh,
I
and
don't think I ever
and
thought about that before.
yeah, and so that's what it means by clean and unclean.
Okay. Yeah, because when you said about that, I was like, oh, we're definitely going to find out about that. I bet not many people know what clean or unclean animals are.
Yeah.
Now you're talking
Now
about,
those dietary laws no longer are binding on us today because, that part of the law was fulfilled in Christ. We're not under the old covenant. So it's okay if you want to eat shrimp, uh, or if you want to eat pig, pork.
yeah.
I eat that. I love bacon,
Oh, me too.
but for a Jew living under the old covenant before Jesus died on the cross, it was, against the laws that God made for his people.
Yeah.
Those laws would also make the people different from those around them. So it would set them apart as different, as unique, as God's holy people.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now the next question I have for you was about the different kinds. Because something I don't think a lot of people, when they read about the story of Noah, I don't think they actually think about this. They, two of every animals, but it wasn't two of every animals. It was two of every kind.
Right. Yeah.
Meaning that
It
they
doesn't
didn't.
use two of every
Yeah,
species.
meaning he didn't take two lions and two cheetahs. He would have taken
Right.
either the cheetahs or the lions. He took only one type of the cats,
Right.
just like he
And
likely took one type of wolves.
right.
Um,
Yeah. So he took a male and a female wolf type of animal,
yeah,
not German shepherds and
yeah.
Dobermans and
And I thought that
yeah.
was an interesting. I thought that was an interesting point to bring up again, just because a lot of people, I would imagine, they probably think it's all the different animals that he put on there, but you're saying
Mm,
that it's not all the different animals; it's just the different kinds of
yeah.
animals.
Yep. So he took two of every representative kind. And after the flood, when those animals, those kinds multiplied, there were different variations that were already in the genome that expressed themselves in different characteristics. So I have no doubt that, well, some of these animals, like you can take a horse and a zebra and you can breed them and, get a zorse. They call them zorses. And
Uh,
I've seen one, at
okay,
the Creation Museum
yeah,
near the zoo area.
I'm actually a fan of ligers. Not to get
Oh,
off on
yeah.
too much
Yep.
of
Yeah.
a tangent. Let me ask you
Yeah.
real quick though, since we brought it up. What these the interbreeding of animals like ligers or
Mhm.
what you just said, the zebra and the horse?
Yeah.
Um, is that like an abomination?
No, it's not.
Okay,
Um, but the fact that they can interbreed shows that they're of the same kind.
okay,
Now sometimes when two of the same kind, but yet they've diversified so much, sometimes they can't produce fertile offspring. But it shows they're still of the same kind.
yeah. That's
So
the problem with ligers and specifically and
yeah,
zions.
yeah, yeah. They're
They
just
they
not as
they
good at surviving and
yeah,
hunting.
yeah, they
Yeah,
don't they usually have trouble, reproducing on their own, and then they usually have other genetic problems as well sometimes.
yeah, yeah. So that's why you don't find them in nature.
Yeah,
You
but
find
that's
them
why
as
I asked that.
humans put them together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I bring up, though, about it being an abomination, though, about
Oh.
because it's humans manipulating nature,
Mhm.
or is it not? Am I wrong?
Uh, no, I don't think that's wrong.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, and people do that, more for a study. They
Yeah,
want to see what'll happen, and
yeah. I just figured out what our next episode is gonna be, Pastor. We'll talk about that after we're finished with this.
yeah,
I would do
okay,
like, one or two more questions that I wanted to ask you before we wrap up this the survey analysis. Um,
mhm,
you talked about both Noah and Abraham in Genesis.
yes.
How many generations it separates those two?
Um, I don't recall offhand,
Okay,
but Abram he lived not very long after the flood. Uh,
okay,
so there wasn't. Okay, Abraham was like not long after the Tower of Babel.
okay.
So yeah, I think that the Tower of Babel happened like maybe 100 or 200 years after the flood, somewhere in that time range. I studied that. Let me look at my Bible here. I think I wrote down like I really tried to figure out the timing.
You
Uh,
know, at this point, Pastor, you know that I always ask you about the timeline to help people understand the timeline of the
okay,
Bible.
all right, here it is. I wrote it down because I really tried to like figure this out very carefully. So the Tower of Babel uh, was between 101 and 340 after AF. I say AF after the flood.
After the flood,
Okay, so
okay.
like between 100 and 340 years after the
After the
flood,
flood, okay.
because because these were in the days of, there's a guy named Peleg. And so, there's a way you can look at the genealogies and calculate that.
Yeah.
So then Abram, was not too long after that.
So maybe only a couple of generations.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And Abraham obviously would be a descendant of Noah,
Yes,
as
yeah,
wasn't
through
wasn't
Shem.
wasn't everybody at that point, right?
Yeah,
After the flood.
yeah, yeah. So Noah had three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So like the Japhethites, you and I are of Japheth. He moved northwestward, into Europe. And Ham settled more in northern Africa and the Middle East, and and then Shem, that's who the Jewish people came from.
Okay.
So they're different. I'm not sure where the Chinese fit in with that. I don't. I'd have to research that.
There another one
Uh,
for another episode, or another one of
yeah,
our shorts or something like that.
yeah.
Now
My
you
guess would be they'd be of Shem, but I'm not certain about that.
the last thing, well, one of the last things, two more things. The story you talked about Abraham and his sons. How many
Yeah.
sons did Abraham have?
Oh, I'd have
Many.
to look at the genealogies. He had, well,
Was
see, Abraham had I Isaac and Ishmael.
Yeah, that's actually
Yeah,
where I was going with
yeah,
this line of questioning. That's where I wanted to take us to the story of Isaac and Ishmael.
yeah, yeah. See, God told Abraham, "Hey, you and your wife are going to have a son." Well, time was marching on, and they were waiting on God's promise, and they got impatient, so they wanted to try to hurry things along. So Sarah said, how about if I give you my handmaiden, Hagar, as another wife, and then you have a child by her, and then you'll have a son. So that's how Ishmael was born. But that wasn't God's plan. God said to Abraham that you and Sarah will bear a son. And so it would be the result of a miraculous, like they were too old to have children. So God would actually have to do a miracle. So Isaac eventually was conceived, and Sarah bare Isaac. So a lot of people believe, and I think it's probably the case, that Ishmael was the father of the Arabs.
Yeah, that's what the story that I've heard
Yeah,
it told many times before. Isaac, the son of the father of the Jews, Ishmael, the father of the Arabs.
yeah, yeah. And so there was a conflict between Isaac and Ishmael, and there's still a conflict between
It's still going
the
on
Jews
today.
and
Yeah,
the
it's
Arabs today.
that's isn't that so interesting? I just
Yeah,
find that's something that I find very interesting about the Bible, the story of Isaac and Ishmael and the Jews and the Arabs and the
yeah,
history of all
mm,
of it. And the last thing I want to talk about is the Tower of Babel.
yeah.
Now Noah and his sons settled in different parts of the world. That was before the Tower of Babel, right? Did they set off, or did the
Uh,
Tower of Babel come because
the,
they didn't set out and go and
well,
everybody was just go ahead.
yeah, there were a few generations that went by. So, like,
Okay.
Noah and his sons really aren't blamed for, what happened at the Tower of Babel. That was,
I, I wasn't trying to blame them.
yeah,
I
yeah.
wanted to try and get some context so his son settled in different places, but then naturally all of humanity just kind of came all back to the same area again.
Well, okay, the world's population after the flood was drastically reduced from
Yes,
who knows how many to,
seven, I
Noah
believe,
and
was
his
the
three,
number.
yeah, yeah. So I have no doubt they stayed together, which would have been
For a while,
completely
yeah.
appropriate. But this is after, a few generations went by and men began to multiply on the face of the earth.
Because
So
people
we
even
don't
because
really
people
know how many were there. But let me just read to you here. It says, these are the These are the families of the sons of Noah after their generations in their nations. And by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. And it just says, the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And so there's a genealogy in chapter 10. And so there are like a number of generations that take place here.
Okay.
So yeah,
Between Noah's sons and the Tower of Babel.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay. And then the Tower of Babel, of course, was because God doesn't want us as a one world government. Isn't that interesting that humanity believes so much that, a one world government, if we all just work together, the world would be a better place. God probably wants us to make the world a better place, but he doesn't want us to do it as a one world government.
Right. Because, on the surface, the idea sounds good and rosy and wonderful, but the problem is it will never work. It will never work because humans are corrupt.
Yeah.
And so when you get power concentrated into a few people or one person or just concentrated power, there's something about humans that they become corrupted by it. And so that's, our founding fathers, they recognized this.
Yeah.
Because they had a biblical worldview. So they intentionally tried to set our Constitution up in such a way that the power would not be concentrated in a few, but that power would be separated.
Yeah.
So, you have not only our federal government, but we still have our state and local governments. And then you have the three different branches. And when you have just a few people making all the decisions, it's bad news. And so, they didn't want the power concentrated in the president or just in the Congress or just in the Supreme Court. So the idea is, hey, we need a constitution. I was reading one of the Federalist papers, part of it, and I think it was James Madison. He said, if men were angels, then no government would be necessary. But men aren't angels, so
And the Federalist paper is very important to our own Constitution as well.
Yeah.
Those were all my questions. I think that's a great first. This is a great first episode and an excellent survey analysis that we did that we're doing after it. So look for more of these. We haven't decided. I don't know. I think we're going to be releasing them once a week. So look, every week we'll be releasing the episode, just Pastor Gavin by himself. And then either a couple of days or maybe a week later, we'll release the segment with me and Pastor Gavin and the questions and stuff. We're not really sure about exactly how we're going to release things, but we do know that Pastor Gavin's main segment will be released every week. So if you're watching this, that means the first one's aired. So look next week for the next episode. And it'll be Exodus, right, Pastor? Exodus is the next book. So next week we'll be covering Exodus. Marcus Fredrickson plays us in and out of everything on the Boiling Point podcast, everything on our sister show. He's going to play us in and out of Pastor Gavin's series here, of the series that we're developing. Check him out. ReverbNation.com/Marcus Fredrickson. Check out our storefront, bonfire.com/store/The Boiling Point Podcast. I believe Pastor Gavin is also wearing his tonight.
Yep.
The American Cross. Yep, the American Cross design. We have some new designs up on our storefront. Check them out. I highly recommend the American Cross Second Amendment T-shirt. That is a recommendation from me. I'd pick that one up right away. Thank you, Pastor Gavin, for doing this series and for doing the after show as well. I am your host. I am not your host, JD. I'm just your analyst in this series. Pastor Gavin is your host, and that's the end.
Is this, oh my soul, what wondrous love is this, here on coast the Lord of bliss, to bear the dreadful curse for my soul, to bear the dreadful curse for my soul.